I think if you were to ask me my opinion on Bitcoin development, I would say considerate and conservative, right? And I think that there are a lot of people in the Bitcoin community that have well-considered proposals. I've listened to your discussions with Steve Lee and with John Carvalho, and I think there are a lot of people, and with Bitcoin core devs like Gloria Zhao, and I think that they're very considered, very responsible. I've been a big supporter of the Bitcoin Security Initiative at MIT, and I think generally my view on this is Bitcoin is an extraordinary protocol, maybe the most successful protocol, the most important protocol in human history. Certainly, it's up there with base 10 math and English and the like. So, I think the Bitcoin protocol is very important. I also think that we ought to prioritize integrity. You said, "Am I in favor of Bitcoin ossification?" No, but am I in favor of Bitcoin integrity? Yes. Bitcoin security? Yes. Right? Bitcoin stability? Yes. I definitely believe in stability. Like, do I think that the numbers 1 through 9 are stable? Yeah. If you want to call them ossified, we could debate it, but I think it's an irrelevant thing. I think ossification is a straw man put forth by people that have a progressive proposal. And if someone says, hold it now, let's think about it, right? They can say, well, you just don't want to change anything. Well, I mean, the truth is, I think it's a mistake to presume that you have to change the protocol in order for Bitcoin to be successful. I think there's a lot of software. I mean, you have to write software to make the nodes run. You have to write software to make the Bitcoin mining work. You have to write software for the wallets. You have to write software for communication. You have to consider bugs in the software that might prevent the nodes from coordinating, right? There's a lot of software to consider. And if someone wants to write a full node Bitcoin that runs on the iOS versus Android versus some new operating system versus whatever, right? I think those are all reasonable considerations, and we're going to write software. I even think there's a place to write software to check the network, right? Is the network healthy? to monitor the network. And so I'm not against software. If you said to me, there's a contingent of mathematicians that want to introduce a new integer between 7 and 8, I would think, let's be considerate and conservative in that, and let's consider what we're going to break.
Right, okay, so you could almost like partition this between what is opcodes and expansion of what the protocol can do versus, when, like you said, integrity and security, protection of the network from catastrophic failures, attacks, hacks. Are you seeing those as two different things? It's it's not that you want conservatism around, much more conservatism around the expansion of what the protocol can do.
Defend the network. Don't F with the network. Make sure the network is healthy. Don't introduce risks, unnecessary risks to the network that might infect it with a disease.
But any substantial change, there'll always be some risk. I mean, we saw that with Taproot, right? With Taproot, we made it a lot easier for people to put inscriptions, and that was an unintended consequence. Was that like a warning shot for you? Was that what made you think about this?
Everybody's Bitcoin journey is different. I mean, I didn't really start thinking hard about Bitcoin until 2020, and my focus on Bitcoin was the asset, the economics, the adoption throughout the rest of the world. And if you look at all my writings and look at all my podcasts, you won't see that I ever took a public position on Bitcoin development, Bitcoin Core, SegWit, Taproot, or the like. And in fact, SegWit was before me. before my time, right? During, as a resolution to the block size wars, or at least an outcome of, right? It was an artifact of the block size wars. And I just accepted it as a given. And then Taproot took place early in my Bitcoin journey, and I didn't really focus on whether it was risky or not risky and good or bad. I think I'm only now getting to the point where I start to think hard about the philosophy of Bitcoin development. And I think that's appropriate. Wait 4 years, study things, think about it, because maybe your opinion when you first get started might be modified by some experiences.
Just to add to that is, are you having to consider how much people listen to in the weight of opinions you might have? If I have an opinion, a certain number of people listen to it. If you have an opinion, a lot of people might listen to it. And do you feel the weight of that?
Yes, I do feel like there's a responsibility. If you're a leader in the community, don't create inflammation.
Yeah.
Like you can have 100 opinions privately and share it with your circle of trust. And you may or may not be, you may be right, you may be wrong, but that's how you learn. So I think being private and considerate and exploring your opinions and developing an opinion is reasonable. But if you just go on Twitter and start spouting 100 definitive opinions about 100 things, what's certain is you probably aren't the expert in each of the 100 areas, and you probably don't have the most invested in each of the 100 areas. So generally, you just enrage a lot of people who know more or who have a lot more invested in it. So I think you ought to wait until you've actually gathered enough information and you have a point of view which is considered that's worth sharing. So that's why, I mean, if you look at me on Twitter, I don't engage in the debates over, this proposal or that proposal, and I might have a private opinion about it, and I've expressed private opinions that I think we should be careful and very conservative. But I don't then convert that into, and therefore that means you should not support this or you should not do that, because the devil's in the details. Let me just make a point about philosophy, though. The Bitcoin protocol is the essential governance. It's the government of Bitcoin, the nation. If Bitcoin was a nation, the protocol is the body of laws that govern the nation. And the protocol has no statute of limitations. So for all practical purposes, when you put something in the protocol, it's like writing a law that might very well last 1,000 years. So that being the case, if you ask me what is my philosophy about politics, I'm in favor of small government, not big government. I'm in favor of less, not more. I'm in favor of free markets, not central or not government mandated agencies. If there's a choice between should the government do it or should a corporation or a free actor do it, I think the government should stay out of it. If a bunch of people come to the nation's capital and they have 100 ideas for 100 ways to make government more beneficial to you, and they want to help you by giving you government mandated food and government issued education and government issued fill in the blank, I'm fairly skeptical. And I actually admire politicians like Reagan that said government isn't the solution, government is the problem. And how about an initiative where you make the government smaller, not bigger? Right? And of course, lobbyists and politicians, they think government is the solution of everything, and they want to intervene in what you say, what you eat, your medicine, how you raise your children, how you educate, how you travel, where you can go, and in the extreme, the government might tell you you're not allowed to have Thanksgiving dinner with 6 people in your family or sit more than 6 feet away from someone, and so in your own private home. So I'm in favor of small government. And in the same way, I'm not in favor of big protocol. I'm in favor of small protocol. I'm in favor of do the minimum. if you believe the government should do the minimum to control your life, you believe that the protocol should do the minimum, because it's very hard, to reverse this. And if you look at the history of civilization, every empire starts small and struggling. It's the underdog, and you're trying to struggle to live. And then at some point they win. And when they win, they conclude that they're the most virtuous, and then they get rich. And then when they get rich, they start creating more laws, and those laws get to be ridiculous, and they create inflation, and they create regulation. And I think most people in the Bitcoin community are against inflation, and I think we're against regulation. And the whole irony is Bitcoin is a technology to escape the vices or the oppression of inflation and regulation. So why would we want to encourage inflation in the protocol and regulation in the protocol?
Sorry, can you define inflation in the protocol and regulation in the protocol, just so I understand the analogy?
Yeah, I mean, if I dump another million lines of code that does when I'm adding functionality and performance and scalability via features, and I'm writing all this code, I'm creating inflationary dynamics in the protocol. What is inflation? I'm devaluing something else, whatever that else is. I might be undermining the security. I might be undermining the simplicity. The protocol is encroaching on the free market. And I won't say in all circumstances changes to government encroach on the free market. You could actually, in theory, pass a law which shrinks the government, right? You could make changes to the government that makes it smaller. But I guess I would say I'm not in favor of any law, because some laws make government bigger, and they're inflationary, and they're regulatory, and they're oppressive. Some laws might make government smaller and more efficient and more effective. And so I would consider any law. Code is law, right? When you write code, you're just writing a law in cyberspace, right? I mean, software developers are the lawyers of cyberspace when they write law. And, it's one thing. You write code for your application, like Cash App. It's a layer 3 app. You're risking your shareholders' money and your corporate credibility, but you're not going to crash the Bitcoin network. When you write code for layer 2, you've got to be a bit more consensus driven, because now there's 100 or 1,000 other companies that have to work with your Lightning or work with your whatever, and you have to go 100 times slower. But when you write code for layer 1, the protocol, either you're in different stages. In the first few years of Bitcoin, it wasn't sure it would work. You had the catastrophic inflation bug, and you have to move fast and take risks.